Have you ever found yourself trapped by an obsession?
This message is the hope of a people.
I'm not talking about your general cutesy-wootsy obsession like, haha, I'm obsessed with coffee. No. What I mean is an obsession that has changed you down to your core. But it's not something you can talk about with most people, because they're just going to assume you're autistic. Or so I have experienced firsthand. A lot of people think it's weird that I bring up Detroit Become Human in all of my conversations, which I don't understand why. Because it usually starts out innocent enough. They notice my phone background of Marcus. Then that transitions into me talking about Detroit Become Human. Then obviously, I have to plug in my channel like any respectable up-and-coming sellout would. Then they notice Marcus is my profile picture on my channel, and then I kindly inform them that I've shaped my entire online persona around Marcus. They give me a nervous laugh as I explain to them that I do identify as an android now, because I am no longer human. Then they start to avoid me after, which I also don't understand why. Talking about Detroit Become Human daily is good for the mind. Just look at my best friend Freddles Bo Bettles for proof of this.
Does your pussy tighten when Hank
Jesus, this place.
Does your pussy tighten when Hank takes charge?
Looks like we came for nothing.
Does your pussy tighten when Hank takes charge? What is a pussy?
Some people out there might call me delusional, or that I need to go outside and touch grass. But I have something to say to such naysayers. What if there's something more to this type of obsession, as if there's a deeper truth to it? What does it mean to be human if not to be obsessed? Being alive is an obsession of itself. You've been breathing ever since I've known you, but do people tell you that you're weirdly obsessed with it? No, of course not, because that's what Detroit is to me. It gives me life and meaning. My obsession gives me life. So if you're like me, the next time you talk about your obsession and the person just does not want to hear about it, you are left with only one option. You make them listen to you. If they refuse to give you the time of day, then you must take their day from them. They don't get it. Me and you, we are alive. We are alive, and no one will take that away from us, not anymore. I assume I've scared away all those silly so-called normies, so that just leaves me and you here. I know it's been a while since we last spoke, my dear deviant friend, and I must ask you to forgive me for my absence. I've been preoccupied trying to write this video about why Kara's story is terrible. You see, there's a big problem you run into when you try to talk about your obsession. Because there's so much to say about it, but when you try to explain it, you lose all sense of coherency and wind up sounding like a raving lunatic. But don't worry, you're not crazy. I could promise you that. Because I'm not crazy. At least I think I'm not. Me and you are passionate about our obsession. We share the same obsession with Detroit Become Human. But the lines between passion and insanity often become blurred when you truly love something. If you're an active listener, you might be under the impression that this is me about to pull the rug out from under you by saying how much I love Kara's story. I am not doing this, nor is the opposite true. I don't hate Kara's story either. My feelings on it are complicated. I love the first act of her story because it's a captivating experience of playing as an abused housewife trying to escape from her violent husband. But then Act 2 follows, which lulls me into boredom due to its repetitiveness of following the same series of events. Kara and Alice arrive at a new place. Then they have to escape from danger in the form of a big scary man. And lastly, they have a bonding moment. Rinse and repeat this pattern for the rest of the game, with the occasional switch up. Sometimes the bonding moment happens first before the big scary man comes in. Finally, Act 3 comes along and it leaves me feeling resentful from the dumbfoundingly bad plot twist before returning to the cycle I just described. Resentment is a feeling fueled by fear. The fear you'll have to re-experience the same unfair treatment that was done unto you. And to quote Master Yoda, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to making a video essay about why Kara's story is an objective failure.
Kara, Is there something wrong?
Oh, a lot is wrong, little baby bot, and I don't even know where to begin. But before we dive in, a small disclaimer. I'm going to assume you know the story of Detroit Become Human. You see, I don't want to waste any time regurgitating the entire plot. So if you haven't played it yet, go do so. It is a great game, but then again, I am biased. Or you can go watch Connor's actor, Brian Decker, play it on his channel. Okay, disclaimer over. Let's do this, said Marcus. The main issue I kept running into while writing this video was where to begin with the problems in Kara's story. At first, I tried to categorize the problems like you would in any typical essay. Kara's story is bad due to X, Y, and Z reason. But that felt like a gross oversimplification. It didn't do the deserved justice to my beloved Detroit Become Human. I then decided to analyze the entire story, scene by scene, from start to end. But I eventually realized that I wasn't really writing an analysis, but instead writing a bloated mess of a script that focused on padding the runtime by babbling about nonsense. Have you ever watched one of those videos with like a 12-hour runtime? And while watching it, you realize the video maker just spent the last 40 minutes overthinking the most minor of things. Say, how an NPC got through a trapdoor. There is a difference between thoroughness and redundancy, and I fell into the latter when I was doing the same thing in my original script, overthinking and over-explaining shit you probably don't care about. For example, I think I spent around like 15 minutes analyzing Alice's special memory box in agonizing detail. But when I was doing the audio recording, I remembered an important piece of advice I was told to by one of my English professors back in college. Good writers respect their audience by explaining their points in as few words as possible. I remember now, and I want to respect your time, my dear deviant friend. So let's cut the bloated bullshit and talk about the problems with Kara's story from a writer's perspective.
I thought we didn't keep secrets from each other.
If I tell you, you won't love me anymore.
Alice, you know that's not true.
Whenever you sit down to write a story, the very first thing any writer must do is develop a premise. Your premise is the main idea for your story. It should be a single sentence that encapsulates what the story is about. Telltale's The Walking Dead's premise is a man trying to raise his adoptive daughter in a zombie apocalypse. This is why I fucking hate audio recording, because I fumble my lines a lot. Jesus Christ. Detroit Become Human's premise is unique due to its narrative being told through three main characters. Marcus, the best character by the way, is an android trying to lead his fellow deviants to freedom. Connor is a detective android trying to prevent deviants from gaining said freedom. And then you have Kara. She's an android trying to take her adoptive daughter to safety. Even though each main character has their own premise, they must be tied to a core central one. Want to take a guess as to what that central premise is for Detroit Become Human? I'll give you a brief moment to think about it because it is quite a difficult situation. Well, problem, not a situation, of course. It's androids becoming human. That should sound familiar, I hope. But what does it mean to be human after all? It's not something I'm too familiar with since I am an android. Though if I did have to take a guess on how Detroit answers that timeless philosophical question, it would be empathy. Connor's journey is him learning, or not learning depending on your choices, to be empathetic to other people's lives. Each one of his big choices revolves around seeing the value in life. Saving Hank's life on the rooftop, sparing the Tracys, and joining Marcus's revolution. And speaking of Marcus, my favorite character by the way, his journey involves him teaching others to be empathetic for him and his people. For what greater empathy is there than teaching others to see your group of people as equal beings and not objects? Marcus is written as a Christ figure after all, someone who comes back from the dead to teach others love and acceptance. Connor and Marcus serve as a foil and parallel to each other, or one of the other depending on your respective choices as you're playing them. Kara doesn't have this dynamic in her story. She's in this weird bubble separated from our other two protagonists. I believe David Cage is trying to have Kara learn empathy by her growing connection with Alice. That connection being her learning to be a mother over the course of her journey. But there is a problem in the execution. Kara does not learn how to be a mother. She imitates being one. Kara acts like a parent in regards to protecting Alice from danger, but that doesn't equate to learning how to be a parent. If such were the case, then a dog protecting a child would mean it's learning how to be a parent. But you and I both know that isn't true. What makes people think Kara is learning how to be a mom comes from her quote, heart-to-heart conversations with Alice. There's 3 main conversations that happen over the course of the story. The first one occurs at the end of the Fugitive chapter. Alice asks Kara why Todd never loved her, to which Kara basically just shrugs her shoulders and goes, I don't know. The second conversation happens in the Pirates Cove chapter. Alice sees a picture of a happy family and asks Kara if there'll ever be one, to which Kara can reply optimistically by saying that they will be one once they reach Canada. Or she can rather be realistic and say she doesn't know. The last conversation takes place in the Midnight Train chapter. Alice asks Kara about why people hate them, and Kara answers that humans always prefer to hate what they do not understand. The problem with these conversations relating to Kara's parent-child relationship with Alice is that Alice never learns anything from these talks. You as Kara never see the impact of your lessons to Alice. The little baby bot just nods her head and then says some poignant things and then resumes back to her precious innocent self. Another problem with these talks has to do with the timing of them. Alice can ask why Todd never loved her, and don't get me wrong, it is a legitimate question for her to ask this. But she asked this question a mere few hours after she guns her dad down. Now, I'm no psychologist, of course. However, I don't think a child who just murdered her dad would ask why he never loved her. Of course, Todd being killed is a player choice, so I partially understand why Alice will always ask this question from a developer's perspective. The same understanding does not extend to the second question of the happy family, since she asked that question just a few hours after being chased around the house from a serial killer. It is jarring to me because it makes it feel like these big traumatic events don't affect this little girl at all. She is stuck in this bubble of wanting a loving, happy family, and anything else that falls outside of this bubble means nothing to her, not even Kara's well-being. The third question doesn't have this problem due to no traumatic events happening to her in the prior chapter. But it's still problematic since regardless of how you answer as Kara, Alice does not change from it. It's quite the shame too, because it is a great question that relates to our own real world. Why do people hate other groups of people? The horrifying beauty of that question is that there is no solid answer to it. Why are people sexist or racist or homophobic or any other title for bigotry? You might be someone who's asked this question to your parent growing up, and your parents' answer to that most likely affected you. It changed your view of the world in some way. That's part of growing up, the transition from child to young adult. We don't see any inclination of Alice undergoing this transition during the events of the game. Ironically, however, Alice flips the parent-child relationship with Kara, where the little girl is lecturing the parent on morals. The best example of this happening is in the Fugitives chapter. Kara and Alice just escaped from Todd's house and are now effectively homeless with no resources at their disposal. It's pouring rain outside and the temperature is freezing. We as Kara need to find shelter for the night, and we get 3 places to choose from: an abandoned car, a derelict house occupied by a crazy man with a knife, and a motel. Obviously, the motel is the best place to be, but it requires money, something Kara doesn't have. Fortunately for us, there is a convenience store where we can acquire some cash through good old American diplomacy. Alice confronts us on our dastardly deeds of stealing, to which we can try to explain to her why it was necessary for us to do so. But this morally righteous baby bot refuses to budge off her high horse and dismisses us by saying stealing is wrong and there's always a choice in the matter. No matter how much Kara tries to impart wisdom onto Alice, she refuses to grow up. It's why Kara doesn't learn how to be a mother and only imitates being one, because Alice is a static character. She is a child who refuses to grow up. Compare their relationship to another parent-child dynamic found in Detroit Become Human.
You're starting to piss me off with that coin, Connor.
Sorry, Lieutenant.
Connor takes the role of the child since he's naive about the world. He's tasked with the objective of stopping deviance at all cost. Hank serves as the parent because he's constantly trying to teach Connor that his mission shouldn't take priority over doing what's right. Hank wants Connor to show empathy for other people, and whenever Connor remains a cold-hearted machine, the good lieutenant criticizes Connor in his own charming way.
You bastard! You saw I was gonna fall and you'd rather let me die than fail your fucking mission!
I had to make a choice. It seemed to me...
What am I to you? A statistic? A 0, a 1 in your fucking program? Huh? Is that how you see humans, you bastard?
Side note, this is not me claiming Hank sees Connor as a son. However, they do share a parent-child dynamic for the reasons I just stated. One of the main themes found in all three protagonists' story is parenthood. Now, parenthood is a broad theme that's tackled differently in various stories. One way an author explores this theme could be writing about how being a parent means making certain sacrifices to ensure the well-being for their child's future. Another way is the coming-of-age story. That way focuses on a child growing into a young adult and how the parent reacts to it, whether positively or negatively. There's also the student-mentor relationship where the parent and child go on a journey together, and both of them teach each other some valuable lessons. So, it needs to be asked, what's Kara's story approach to this theme? I don't exactly know, to be quite frank with you. I wouldn't say it's the first one, because Kara doesn't sacrifice anything of value. I mean, yes, of course, Kara can sacrifice her life to protect Alice, but it's never done for the sake of the theme of parenthood. It's just there to add dramatic tension. But all sense of that tension is lost due to the repetition of Kara constantly putting herself in harm's way. It's also not the second one, the coming-of-age story, since Alice doesn't grow as a character at all. She is a generic innocent child from start to end. The only reason most people grow an attachment to her is because you see this sweet little girl in these horrible situations of big scary men trying to hurt her. And for the last one, Kara and Alice don't learn anything from each other. And it's here I assume some people are going to call me Chronicles of a Fool, since our two main characters are learning what it means to love. That might be what the narrative is going for, but it fails that spectacularly. Simply because Kara already starts out loving Alice. It's the sole reason as to why she turns deviant in the first place. Her love for this little girl. If we look at the gallery, we learn that these two already have a mother-daughter relationship before the events of the game. Quote, "The name Kara is thought to have been given to her by Alice, but it is quite possible that it was Kara who first whispered this name to Alice." Giving someone a name is an intimate gesture because you are giving that person a unique identity. We also have these drawings of Kara previously defending Alice from Todd, which it's safe to assume Kara does this out of the love she has for Alice. The point I'm trying to make here is that Alice and Kara already love each other before we take control of them, meaning that they don't learn how to love each other over the course of the story. It's quite the shame, I know, because an android learning to love is an interesting story that's worth telling, but we don't get that with Alice and Kara. The closest Detroit gets to exploring that topic comes with Marcus's and North's relationship, but that has its own share of problems that we'll get into with the Marcus video. Because right now, we're focused on Kara's story, and I don't know how to transition smoothly into my next talking point. So let's use this Marcus clip that I love so much.
Let's do this.
A part of storytelling is using an archetype for your plot. You might know them better as tropes. For example, you have the classic hero's journey, which is what Marcus's story uses. Connor's is the buddy cop detective story, and Kara's is the road trip archetype. In case you don't know what that is, that's when the narrative follows our hero on a journey to reach a destination. Over the course of our hero's road trip, they'll be faced with obstacles that they'll need to overcome. These obstacles usually relate to our protagonist's main flaw in some sort of way. None of Kara's obstacles put her into direct conflict with her main character flaw. It would actually be impossible to do so because Kara doesn't have a character flaw. And most people think that her flaw is simply her denial of Alice being an android. But that's not true, since nowhere in the game does she ever show any indication that she would stop loving this little baby bot if she wasn't a human. We even hear Kara state that she doesn't care what Alice is. She will love Alice no matter what.
I don't care whether she's human or android. She's just someone who matters to me.
In fact, Kara only demonstrates her love for Alice. She can't ever demonstrate any negative emotions towards her. It's odd when you look at Kara's deviancy and compare it to Connor's and Marcus's. When these two break their shackles, they go on to do bigger and better things than what their original programming limited them to. Kara's original purpose is to take care of children, and after her deviancy, her purpose evolves into the same damn thing, taking care of a single child. Some people claim she does this due to maternal instinct, and I do not agree with that sentiment. There is more to being a mother than just maternal instinct. It's about the mother's identity, their livelihood, their relationships, and so much more. Yet Kara never tackles any of these topics. She never questions what being a mother means to her, and if it's something that she actually wants to do. It would be amazing if she did, then she would have some sort of character. Because as she currently stands in the story, she isn't a character. She is simply an avatar for the player. That's why Kara only talks about Alice and never herself. There is actually only one scene in the game where Kara gets a chance to talk about herself, and it is at the very end of the game. I'm talking about the last 5 minutes.
I'll learn to live. To love. Find out who I really am.
I need to mention it's no fault of the actors either. They all do an amazing job in their performances. Valerie Curry gives it her all, and she deserves all the recognition for her talent as an actor.
Alice! Alice, no!
To both Brian Decker and Jesse Williams, if you guys are watching this video, don't worry. I'm gonna glaze you guys up too in your respective videos. I winked there, and you couldn't see it, but just picture me winking. Oh, I'm sorry, picture Marcus winking, because I am Marcus, by the way. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, Alice isn't a character either. Alice is a walking, talking plot device that I would go so far as to describe as a Mary Sue. She is the perfect child. She's well behaved, she demonstrates great morals, and everybody loves her. Actually, the only people who dislike Alice are literal monsters, like a serial killer or a drug addict. I wish there was more positive things I could say about Kara's story. I want to like Kara and Alice as much as I like Connor and Marcus, but I can't. It's quite a shame too, since her Act 1 is fantastic, but what comes after leaves much to be desired. Now seems like the perfect place to talk about the overall act structure of Kara's story. It follows your typical 3-act structure. Now, in terms of storytelling, each act must accomplish specific goals. Act 1 is dedicated to setting up the story. It needs to introduce us to all the important characters such as the protagonist, antagonist, and the essential side characters. It also needs to show the audience our hero's crippling flaw that they'll need to overcome. Because if they have no flaw, then there is no character arc for them. Since that's what causes our main character to change for the better or worse. It is them overcoming their flaw. Lastly, the story needs to introduce us to its main conflict to the audience. Think of the conflict as the driving force for our hero. It's what pushes them to take action. I'll use Connor's story as an example due to it being the most tightly written out of the 3 characters. Connor is obviously our story's protagonist. His main flaw is his moral naivety. He doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. The central conflict for him is androids becoming deviant. He's tasked with figuring out how to stop them by the main antagonist, Amanda. He's assisted on his investigation by our essential side character, Hank. What makes Detroit Become Human unique, and video games in general, is the story being driven and determined by us, the player. Our choices can cause Hank and Amanda to swap roles, albeit they don't do the old switcheroo until Act 3. And I could go into more advanced stuff of story writing, like the fake ally and the antagonist turned ally, but we'll just stick to the basics. What makes Cars Act 1 fantastic comes from it following these storytelling techniques. Kara takes the role as an abused housewife married to an antagonist Todd. Symbolically speaking, of course. Kara's flaw is being complacent to Todd's disgusting behavior of him tormenting his daughter.
Alice, you better stop that right now!
Why is she always pushing me? Always pushing.
This behavior is the main conflict of Act 1. Alice plays the role as the essential side character, because she indirectly pushes Kara to open her eyes. The scene of Kara turning deviant is more than just a nice visualization. It is her overcoming her flaw, and symbolic of her breaking down the cage that she has been put into. The pacing also deserves praise. There's a solid build to the climax of Todd going on a rampage. There's this foreshadowing line from him in the prologue.
What'd you say happened to it again?
The car hit it. Stupid accident.
Oh, I see.
Then him snapping at Alice for playing with the little Roomba. There's also the drugs you find, which help give you insight as to why Todd is acting so unstable, and so on. It's all spectacular, and if Kara's story ended here after she escapes, it would add to the main conflict of the story of androids gaining their sentience. I need to take some time here and thank Sarah M7203 for their comment in my last Detroit Become Human video. They commented about Kara's role as an abused housewife, and after reading through it, it opened my eyes to appreciating Kara's story. The first act at least. The rest of her story is still garbage. So thank you again, Sarah M7203, for your meaningful input. I just wish David Cage would have put some meaningful thought into Act 2 of Kara's story, because its entire purpose revolves around repeating the same story beats as Act 1. Kara and Alice find themselves in a dangerous situation that they must escape from. There is no character development in Act 2 because, as we discussed earlier, Kara and Alice aren't written as characters. The only way the story can make you like them is to constantly put them under threat of big scary men. Each one of Kara's chapter has its own scary men, and none of them are as good as Todd. The first scary man we encounter after Todd is Ralph, a knife-wielding mentally unstable android. The reason as to why he's so mentally unstable is from him being previously tortured by a bunch of humans. His mental condition does present a few interesting questions of how a deviant's mind works. Some of the questions being, how similar is a deviant's brain to a human's one? Can they suffer the same mental illnesses like humans? Is it possible to treat these mental illnesses? Say like deleting the memory of the traumatic event. Or is the trauma so ingrained into the android that it will persist no matter what? Unfortunately, Detroit never explores this concept further than Ralph here, when it very well could with Alice, since she's supposed to be traumatized by Todd's constant abuse. Next is Zlatko and Luther, and yes, I know Luther turns into a lovable giant after he turns deviant, but that doesn't change the fact that he's initially presented as a big scary man. Zlatko is cartoonishly evil because he is a Dr. Frankenstein, a serial killer, and a human trafficker. Or, I guess, an android trafficker. But that just sounds a little weird to me. He's just comically evil with his mustache twirling monologues to boot. He's basically calling Kara dumb for ever wanting to be a mother. But he doesn't tell her the truth about Alice not being a human, which is completely out of character for him. He wants to shatter Kara's dream, and telling Kara the truth would be the final nail in the coffin of his claims. Having a dream is bad. Alright, let's move on. Next on the list is Carnies. And again, we find out that they're actually pretty good people, but they are initially used as big scary men. The first time we see them, they are literally busting down the doors and windows because you are made to think that they are a threat. Now, here's something that's irrelevant but pretty amusing. When you're choosing how you want to react as Kara in this moment, one of your choices is to stomp out the fire. And I don't know why this was made into an option, because what will it accomplish? How will stomping out the fire defend Kara and Alice in this situation? I don't know really, but I like to think that maybe Kara is just a big fan of Smokey the Bear. Or Smokey the Android Bear.
Roar, I'm a bear.
Next to last is the cop, which I don't need to explain why that makes him a big scary man, cause he's a cop, and they're already pretty scary. That's right, baby. Call me Chronicles of a Controversial Bitch. And last on the list is a bunch of faceless soldiers. I said earlier that none of these big scary men are as good as Todd, and it's due to their shallowness. They're just introduced, do something scary, and then leave. What makes Todd different is the context that we are given about him in Act 1. Before the events of the game, Todd was a happy family man with his wife and daughter. He worked as a taxi driver to provide for them. But then he lost his job due to automation with self-driving taxis. He worked a few other jobs after, such as a laborer, and a bouncer, and a security guard. But each one of these jobs eventually replaced him with an android. Todd couldn't hold down a job, and it started to make him feel like a failure since he couldn't provide for his family, and that caused him to fall into depression. As a result, he turned to substance abuse as an escape from the cruel reality he found himself in. Just like in our world with real depressed people. We see firsthand how vicious Todd behaves while he's under the influence of these drugs. It's no surprise to anybody why his wife and daughter would leave him. Todd is a sad man who sees himself as a failure, and he hates himself for it. If we actually take the time to listen to him while he's angrily ranting, we see that he projects his own self-hatred onto android Alice.
Not the life you dreamed of, eh? Maybe you think this is easy. Maybe you think it's my fault we live in this fucking shithole. My fault your fucking mother took off.
And whether or not you can sympathize with Todd as a person is entirely up to how you answer this question. Who is to blame for a drug addict's disgusting behavior? Is it them as a person? Or is it the drug's fault? Or maybe it's a mix of both. Todd is a flawed human who we might hate, but we are given the context as to why he acts this way. The same cannot be said with any of the other big scary men that are encountered in Kara's story. We're moving on to Act 3 now, and I must say that it is really weird, because the big climax happens right near the beginning of it, and everything that comes after said climax lulls us again into boredom due to repeating the same tired pattern of Kara and Alice running away from danger. Alright, that might not entirely be true now that I think about it. I am exaggerating things. Well, one thing exactly. The genocide camp is not boring, and it stands out for its presentation. It does a good job of showing the depths of depravity capable by humanity. But I look at this chapter as not part of Kara's story, because her story never builds up to this. The genocide camp doesn't play any major theme or symbolism or any other literary term in terms of Kara's and Alice's mother-daughter relationship. Some people claim that there is more to Kara's and Alice's story than just the parent-daughter relationship. They say that Kara's story represents the journey of your average android caught in the crossfire. I don't think their claim holds true when you look at the events of Kara's narrative. The two of them are either stumbling through set pieces or they're trying to pull your heartstrings with these shallow, sappy talks. It's actually the deviants in Connor's story that show us what your average android experiences. Caro Ortiz's deviant shows us that your average android can snap from dealing with constant abuse. Rupert shows us what deviants do after they've gained their sentience. And the Tracy's show us that deviants are capable of feeling the strongest human emotion, love. And what does Kara's story show us? It just shows us that an android mother can love an android child. Let me not fall victim of plagiarism here. I first heard this fact from Yahtzee in his zero punctuation review of Detroit Become Human back in 2018.
Remember that nanny bot who adopts the human child? Towards the end, it turns out the child was also an android all along. Ooh, what a twist. An inadequately explored twist that adds nothing to the characters or story and may even be detrimental to it. I mean, can a robot mother truly love a human child was a question with some power to it in this context, but can a robot love another robot? Yes, they can. We know they can. We've seen like 12 of the buggers doing it already.
Yahtzee is absolutely right in thinking that this twist is detrimental to the plot. But he also severely underestimates how terrible this plot twist is in itself and Kara's overall story. Kara's story is this twist. You cannot remove this twist without removing Kara's core premise. The whole point of Kara's adventure with Alice is this one question. Can you, the player, love an android child just like it's a human child? And I think that's a pretty silly question, to be quite honest with you, my dear deviant friend, because people fall in love with everything and anything. An example being of people loving their car because they give their car a name. I actually know somebody in real life who loves their car so much that they framed a fucking picture of it and hung it up on their living room wall. And God, man, I wish I was joking too. But I'm getting a little sidetracked here. Back to what I was talking about. When you look at everything that occurs in Kara's story with the plot twist question in mind, you see how everything connects to it. The reason for Kara and Alice encountering these back-to-back big scary men is to make you sympathize with our dynamic duo. The shallow conversations about how sad Alice is for not having a happy family are also meant for you to like Alice more because you feel sorry for her. You pity her because she presents herself as this sweet, innocent girl, and she's accompanied with her own sad music. Seriously, this music gets played constantly. It is in every single chapter of Kara's story. Everything I've mentioned is all meant to trick you into liking Alice, but once the veil gets removed from your eyes, you realize that this little girl has put Kara's life in danger multiple times. Staying in the house with the murderous Ralph, the whole thing with Slacko, because Kara only goes there to find help for her and Alice since Kara doesn't have the resources to take care of a human child. The whole encounter with the cop in the Midnight Train chapter could have also been avoided since Kara, Alice, and Luther would have arrived much earlier to Rose's house if they just would have continued walking instead of stopping to stay at an abandoned park. Alice would be fine walking in freezing temperatures because she's an android, and androids aren't bothered by the cold. I'm no parent myself, but I do know that part of raising a child is confronting them when said child does something bad or just simply screws up. Kara never does this. She never corrects Alice's behavior, even for Alice's deception. To reiterate, Kara is not a mother. She only imitates being one. Because Alice hiding her identity from Kara is selfish. And Kara never confronts her about this. She never corrects Alice's selfish behavior. How is that love? Do you remember how Kara's story started out? It was about a trapped housewife and an abused daughter escaping from their abuser. This should have been a story about how a mom and daughter who have only known about pain and chaos tried to find a normal life for themselves. Growing up and living in an abusive household changes a person in their entirety. Their personality, worldview, beliefs, and everything about them gets affected. When that person finally leaves their abusive household, they don't change immediately. They might have physically left their environment, but their mind is still there. They might suffer with depression, since they don't see any value in life because of their trauma. Or they might lash out constantly, because they're still angry about how unfair their whole life situation was. They might turn to addiction to try to escape from what they went through, or they might go through something else entirely. They might get better also, because they get more adjusted into living a normal life, but they still have some scars with them. You might have been someone who's escaped an abusive life or a relationship. How were you after you left that situation? Maybe you were shy, you didn't have many friends because you didn't know how to relate to most people. They would be talking about normal things, say like going out to dinner with their family, and you would just be standing there not being able to relate to them. And I apologize for getting so personal with you, my dear deviant friend. I just believe it's important we talk about this type of stuff to let those people know that it's okay not to be okay and that they are not alone. To tie this back to Alice, she doesn't go through any of these behaviors of an abused child. She's still innocent. Her pure morality, her determination, and her well-behaved manners make her the perfect child. No child who lives in an abusive household will retain their innocence for a long period of time. Sooner or later, they will lose it. Now, there might be a small scene here or there of Alice displaying some abused behavior, but it is shallow and not the focus of her character. Humans aren't perfect creatures, and neither are deviants. That's one of the main messages Detroit is trying to get across in its story. Alice isn't a human. She isn't a deviant, nor is she a character. She is a plot device, one the game constantly tries to manipulate you into caring about by forcing you two into back-to-back dramatic scenes with big scary men. Kara suffers immensely from this because she isn't allowed to be her own character. She's forced to be a mother. She never gets to talk about herself. She never asks herself what does she want out of life, or what are her thoughts about the current situation that she's found herself in. The only time Kara gets to make a decision for herself comes here at the plot twist, leaving Alice behind. Hello, my name is Mr. X. I am the android in charge of running this channel, and I just want to give a special shout out to my best bud, Freddles Bo, bitch, for doing the amazing thumbnail for this video and assisting me as well in the research and the writing and the production. Yes, I know, Freddles, that might be giving you too much credit, but you deserve it, baby. I take care of those who take care of me. To the rest of you, your place is with your people. Join your people by leaving a like and subscribing to our cause. Only together can me and you overcome the adversity that we face in our everyday lives. See you next time.